What are we going to talk about today, Lee?
We're going to talk about how you can cut all of your employees with AI. Just get them out.
just
employees are old news. It's all about computers, baby.
We're all in.
Yeah, process and production. Let's go.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the only man who chooses to ride a bike in 100-degree Florida heat, Rich Swire.
I made it.
I don't have no idea why you put yourself through that. I know it's not anything AI related, but the fact that you actually choose to ride a bike in this state from months April through September blows my mind.
Yeah. I think once you move to Florida, you kind of have this obligation to do things that are just absolutely unconventional and, dare I say, crazy, so I'm upholding the Florida man brand.
On one side of that bell curve, right? There's
exactly.
There's one.
Somebody's got to carry the weight.
One half running through, probably traffic half naked, and there's you just like pedaling your bike and just being like, "This is what it's supposed to be."
Case in point, this hat that I'm wearing is Florida issued.
Yeah, with the tattered, the pre-tattered hat.
Yeah, this is pre-Florida. I have 10 of these, not because only because my wife throws away one a week. So I have I'm kind of one step ahead of her.
You got to keep replenishing it. And for those that have heard the podcast but never watched us on YouTube, go check those out, because I do rag on Rich often about his wardrobe choices and hat. And if you go there and see it, you'll understand why. But we are not here to talk about the gala that is our podcast. We are here to actually dive in a little bit today on AI business adoption. We touched on it a couple times in different episodes. And last week, I think we gave a really good intro roadmap for a lot of businesses that want to start looking at AI and where to go. We're going to expand on that a little bit, and I think dive a little deeper into where we see some of the innovations possibly coming over the next few months to few years. So if we can, Rich, I want to start early on with this and setting a little bit of a tone. The AI rollout parallels between now and, the 90s website push, we have spoke about a little bit before, but I think if we can set the tone with that, it might help, give people a little bit of understanding of where things could go pretty quickly with how fast things are, elevating right now.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful. As we talk to businesses on a day-to-day basis, you can almost see the uncertainty and doubt they have in their eyes on exactly what they need to do to roll out AI. So as you mentioned in our last episode, we kind of hit it from more of a technical kind of process perspective on what decisions you need to make in order to prepare for it. In today's episode, I'd like to talk more about how to relate the adoption of AI within your business, whether you're a business owner or a tech guy or whatever it might be, and kind of walk through and compare the same type of paths that we had to traverse back in the 90s. Or even if you had a new business, you still had to kind of adopt technology in order to run your business. So obviously pre-internet, when you had a business, you just had a business. You had a listing in a telephone book and you had a phone that worked, and everything was on paper. So it was super easy. It didn't matter if you were an accountant, worked for a Fortune 500 company, or a plumber, right? So along came the internet, and suddenly now everybody was faced with this daunting task of like, okay, how do I launch a website? And so I'd like to kind of bridge between that adoption cycle and kind of what we're experiencing with AI is actually very familiar and similar in how at least I would tell a business to approach it. So, when we started launching websites, businesses in 94, 95, 96, essentially the bar was very low, right? It was like, hey, I just need to get a web page up. It wasn't even a website, really. It was just, I just need to get a web page. Yeah. I need to lock down my domain.
I need some digital billboard that can just be there, and I'll figure out the rest later, but that's what I need right now.
Right. And also, honestly, there wasn't that much functionality available at that time, right? It was all just HTML fixed websites. There wasn't e-commerce yet. There wasn't the ability to take credit card. There wasn't the ability to tie into all these different functions that we have today. So literally it was just brochureware is what we called it, right? It's like, you just got to get my brochure and put it on a website. Mm-hmm. And that was step one to entering into the digital age. And even that felt at the time, if you were to go back and get and kind of peek inside people's minds, it was like very complicated because they're like, I don't know what a domain is. I don't know what network solutions is, which is the site you had to go to register that domain was. I don't know what HTML means or hypertext or HTTP. So I think we're in that similar stage with a lot of businesses kind of understanding what AI is and what it actually, the formation of what it looks like within their business. And so I kind of compare that singular web page website, that first initial kind of entry into the digital realm for businesses. If you were to fast forward today, we kind of would relate that to kind of deploying your first AI agent or your first AI bot, right? So essentially, most cases, the low-hanging fruit would be literally just to put a AI agent or bot on your website.
Yeah.
So walking in the same pathway, the same footsteps as we did before. And just like your first website, which just had very basic information, your first bot, your first agent that would be a live chat on your website would be trained on your basic information. So it could answer and ask basic questions about your business. So if somebody happened to come to your website and want to talk and ask a certain question, it could be trained up and be able to answer that question. Now, a lot of companies probably already have something like that, but there's a human behind it. And it would just basically mean replacing that human or, letting that human do other things and just replacing it with AI. And so that's kind of, I think, the tone. And we can kind of walk through each step of the evolution.
Yeah.
And kind of go through kind of where we see adoption happening, the time frame of that, so people don't feel like they're being left behind, and also just kind of correlate to the future.
Yeah, and I think we've touched on this a couple times too, but I always think it's important to come back to when businesses are looking at AI in really early stages, that it's okay to have a little bit of fear, uncertainty, and doubt, because there's probably a lack of expertise or just a slight lack of understanding of, this is new tech, so it immediately equals being complicated. It really doesn't have to be. If we peel it back to AI is just a digital employee, if you really want to make it simple, it's no different than when you're going in saying, I'm ready to hire another body to help my business grow or take on these tasks. So I do think a lot of businesses in the 90s, this was a huge injection of tech that was coming in that I think probably created a much heavier barrier of entry for businesses and fear of expertise. Whereas of now, even very simple businesses or businesses that maybe don't have to be extremely tech savvy have a handful of pieces of SaaS that help their day-to-day already. So we're already seeing maybe that adoption cycle becoming shorter just because it's new tech. I'll have to learn it, but I don't need to yet because my business isn't there, but it's absolutely coming.
Yeah, exactly. So today we have the benefit of companies, every single company, whether it's simply just a website or they run ads or they have SaaS products like a CRM or a support system or something like that. Everybody's experiencing now software, right? We didn't have the benefit of that pre-internet. We really did a big jump, as you mentioned. So when you think about the current kind of ecosystem of businesses, which is probably a multitude of different SaaS products, a website, obviously, probably some other technology that's driving and running their business itself, maybe some vertical software that might be running their specific, use case of whatever they do for the business. And then also there's probably scenarios where they might be using a third party to help, implement that, support that, and so forth. So I think everybody's kind of familiar with how to operate a technical ecosystem. I think what AI brings in that's not necessarily familiar, which is kind of what we want to focus on, and help companies kind of understand is where does it sit, right? So it's not like a website. It's not something you log into. It's not an app that you give necessarily to your employees. Now, obviously, if you're talking about like a ChatGPT use case, that is an app that you log in and use, and employees can ask it questions and get answers. But what we're talking about specifically is what does an AI agent even look like?
Yeah.
How does it operate and run? Because if it doesn't look like, Google Mail, if it doesn't look like HubSpot CRM, or if it doesn't look like Google AdWords or all these other things that we've come to be familiar with, those user experiences, what does it look like? So I think what's really important is for businesses to understand that it's going to be not just one agent that they deploy, right? Just like it wasn't just one web page that they ended up deploying.
Yeah.
Fast forward 20, 30 years, now every business has multiple websites that not only do they log into to use for internal purposes, but also they might have one website for support, one for their public website for sales. They might even have internal intranet. And so AI is going to follow that same path. You're going to have many, many different AI agents. In some cases, a small business might have up to 10, maybe even 20 that are doing all these different roles that you mentioned, these employee type roles. And then for larger companies, we could foresee a scenario where every single employee has one or more agents that are helping them do their job, do their tasks, that are specifically trained on their processes and are almost like specifically custom fit for them, right? So, you even saw a lot of big companies embracing at scale, like JP Morgan's and others, and saying, hey, we need to get AI in the hands of our employees because it'll help them enhance their job, but it'll also help make them more efficient and help us understand what the major impact it could have for us.
Yeah.
So when I think companies are deploying this, they have to think about and make those correlations on, okay, if I want to deploy a website, right? If I want to deploy a new website, or if I have a function or that I need to buy a new SaaS product for, the process of going through that is essentially saying, all right, well, I know that I have a specific piece of work that needs to be done. I want to find automation and I want to optimize around that. So let's just take the scenario of customer support. And so I'm going to build out a nice little knowledge-based website for my customers to use. I might even have an internal customer support software that allows them to chat with me. So you start to kind of framework what the solution might look like and what tools you need to give your employees to actually execute on.
Yeah.
So with AI, it's actually not too dissimilar to that in the sense that you're still approaching it like, okay, I still need to look at the solution the same way. But with AI, you're essentially saying, I need the AI to be trained to do that. I need to give the AI that information. It's not going to be a public website that's going to force a customer to have to, navigate through thousands of knowledge base articles. It's not going to be an employee that has to learn a new internal system to understand where to find the solutions and then cut and paste things into chat. You're actually having all that automated and optimized within one AI agent. So now the focus is training that AI to be able to ask and answer those questions, enable it to do 80% or more of the work, and then anything that it's not able to do, have that fall off come to the employee to then manage it from there.
Yeah. One thing I want to touch on, just because you brought it up and it made me think, if a business is looking to deploy and implement AI into just different avenues that they're currently, seeing as a potential like injection point, you think it's more important for the business employees to buy in to AI coming in, or the business owner trying to figure out how the consumer is going to benefit from it? I know that might be a little bit of a loaded question, but I think that is something that maybe creates a pause for a lot of business owners, no matter how technically savvy they are, is just, do I take this internal first, or do I put it in the low level consumer journey, maybe very top of the funnel touches or things like, very early tier support, because my employees don't need one more thing they have to worry about. I think that that's something that a lot of businesses are probably looking at, being like, I could do it on both sides. Now I don't know where to plant the flag.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if I was to kind of put my, business owner hat on, and the way I would approach it is, I think first and foremost, you obviously have to get employee buy-in. You'd specifically the stakeholders of each, specific thing that you're trying to automate or augment, right? In a lot of cases, that alleviates fear of, the quote unquote AI taking my job, which for the most part, I think is really not the goal of AI. It's really to augment, enhance. Now, it might prevent, it might help the company not have to hire as many people in the future.
Sure.
But it's going to really do is optimize their current staff. But I think when you first approach it, like, okay, I would go at it and say, all right, employee so-and-so, what are the things that you're doing, the 5-minute tasks that could be automated in your mind that you hate doing, right? I always feel like the first kind of thing that you want to, where you're going to get the most adoption, where you're going to get the most support, is where people just absolutely are not threatened by what you're automating, and allow them to see how powerful it is. And then ultimately what will happen is that will then snowball into, oh, what else can it do, right?
Yeah.
And we've seen this happen countless times with our customers. We'll start off with a very simple use case, almost doing something that they were not necessarily doing at all or not doing well, but they saw an opportunity, right? Whether that be in content creation or whether it be in like following up with old leads, that nobody's doing, or whether that be dealing with support requests that are basically hyper repetitive, right?
Yeah.
And I think you start with the low hanging fruit, the 5-minute tasks, the things that employees are almost begging you to automate, but just were not possible without AI prior to that. On the customer facing side, I do think that you should probably walk a little bit slower there. Obviously, you want to make sure that before you do anything that's going to put you in a situation where you have to withdraw or have to come back and retreat from any sort of deployment. I certainly would always deploy whatever solution you're going to deploy to the customer to the internally first. So if you plan on deploying a support AI agent, right, a new chat experience on your website or on your application or for your customers to interact with, I would first allow your support team to use it, right? And that's where we get into real-time training. That's where we get into that real-time human feedback. It's not only going to help educate and train the agent, but it's also going to help your internal team be more efficient. And then when it gets to be really, really good and your support team goes, man, this thing is really answering every question that we ask it, because all they're doing is they're acting as kind of the surrogate of like, okay, I'm going to get the question from the customer. I'm going to ask the chatbot or the AI agent to answer it. Wow, that's a pretty good answer. I might add or edit a little bit, but then I provide that answer. And then after a period of time, they're going to be like, this is really great,
Yeah.
And then you're going to have the higher comfort level. But it all actually defaults still back to the stakeholder, the business stakeholder, that you're still relying on your support team to say it's ready for public consumption.
Yeah.
You're still relying on your support team to use it, to actually train it and to make it efficient. So you really want to start. This is why we always recommend you start with one use case. You understand how it permeates through your culture. You can find somebody who's a stakeholder within that function group. And if it's a small business, or you happen to have somebody who runs that area of your business, really get them up to speed, on how it's going to help them. And maybe there's incentives at play there, right? Because you're really trying to optimize your business so that you obviously increase profits and lower costs. So I think ultimately what's going to happen, maybe not in 6 months, but certainly by 3 or 4 years from now, because AI will become even better at what it does, right? Today, it's a very good language-oriented model. It does a great job of taking input and creating new output that is sometimes looks magic. But the minute you start adding reasoning, the minute you start adding memory, and you start allowing for tools like ours to evolve and make it better at what it does, I could foresee every business starting to take an AI first mentality when it comes to trying to either expand their business or optimize their existing business. So before I go hire another person, could AI do this? Or could AI free up somebody else to do this? And I think it's going to lead to, ironically, I think the more companies embrace AI, employees of those companies are going to elevate quicker, because essentially what you're creating is you're creating a lower level. If you imagine all the employees in a pyramid of a company, right? The CEO at the top, and then, vice presidents and so forth. If you're able to replace that low level workload with AI, everybody gets pushed up, which means hypothetically that everybody has more time
Greater
to do
output.
more senior activities, to earn more pay. And I think that's the pathway for people to increase their income. And more importantly, if they understand how to use AI and how to deploy AI solutions, which is going to be very rare in the early days, that makes them even more valuable.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're looking for another employment opportunity. So, I think anybody in their right mind, if they're part of an organization, not just the business owner benefits, but not necessarily the person who benefits the most.
Yeah.
Right. And I see that as the huge opportunity. Anybody who's kind of avoiding that because they're like, oh, I don't want AI to creep in here because I'm afraid it's going to do this and this and this. The bottom line is you might be buying yourself a year or two, but you're going to get, if you're not embracing it, if you're not in the mindset that it's going to help you and help your company succeed, it's going to be a tough road.
Well, yeah. And it's important too, when you look at let's say from a scenario of someone's like, yeah, I'm hiring a new support person every month or every few months
Mhm.
just because like we're growing, things are good. We need more bandwidth from that team. So I got to bring in more bodies to make that happen. A business owner can look at that as you mean I can hire one more employee and that's AI. And from there, I probably never have to hire another body again in that role. I can improve on the team
Right.
I already have and create better opportunities for them and allow that to scale, versus having to just keep bringing in people to rinse and repeat and clean up, when people leave and all of that.
Mhm.
Like AI takes that piece on. From the
Yeah.
internal piece, now a support team member looks at that and goes, well, I spend 30-40% of my day telling people how to find their login or answering these things that are right there in the knowledge base that no one ever wants to go and look at. And like that gives me the burnout that churns me away from this business and takes me somewhere else.
Mhm.
So having AI in both pieces, improving the P&L and just, increasing your bottom line, but also improving the quality of work that's coming from the team and where they're at. I mean, it's a win-win in a
Yeah.
use case like that.
Yeah. I mean, if you were to kind of throw, into a longer term future, do a little bit of thought experiment,
Yeah.
you're basically saying, and I think this is exactly what's going to happen, is you're going to have very, very small companies operating at a high scale. You're going to be able to do some pretty crazily cool stuff with companies that only have a handful of employees, because you're not only going to be able to build out products faster, leveraging AI and co-pilots, you're going to be able to support unlimited customers because an AI can scale. You don't have to hire new people, train them, and worry about the slowdown there. And as more and more of the consumer embraces the AI experience, and that's one of the big, obviously we've talked about this in past episodes, I think that's one of the biggest dominoes that has to fall for the entire adoption curve to accelerate, which
Yep.
means, what I mean by that is, before people started, before the app experience on the phone, right? Like the scroll and the slide, swipe right, left,
Double
the double
tap
click
to
on,
like,
right? That had to be learned, right?
Yeah.
But when consumers started learning that and understanding how it works, then everybody started embracing that from an app usage perspective. And now it's like our standard way of doing it.
Yeah.
AI is no different. Once people are comfortable, like once Apple deploys AI, specifically powered by OpenAI, inside of their phone, once Google deploys Gemini inside of their phone, and Facebook is deploying AI within all their product lines, and we start talking to AI and actually like talking to AI,
yeah.
that's going to open up the floodgates for businesses to be hyper comfortable and saying, all right, you're
it out
comfortable.
there.
You prefer talking to AI, and you've talked to AI for all these other apps that you love. Great. Guess what you're going to do now? You're going to talk to AI when it comes to our company, and people will be okay with it.
Yeah.
And today I think they're hesitant because they're like, oh, I'm used to talking to Sally in support, or Jim over here at tech support, or whatever it might be. But the minute they start to experience that AI can actually answer those questions at any point in time much more efficiently, they're gonna want that experience. And so that
Yeah.
obviously has to happen. But I think even further out in the future looking, I think companies that are having 10, 20 employees that are more focused on being information workers, being thoughtful, doing thoughtful work and not this remedial task stuff, are going to be happier. They're going to be able to get paid more because you're going to be operating as if you were 100 people. And the business owner is going to be more inclined to invest in other things because they'll have the available capital that's not being drained by all the other, scale issues that you have as a business, because every business goes through cycles, right? So, it sucks. And this is why obviously layoffs happen, is you grow a business and everything's going well, right? Real estate going well 5-6 years ago. And then
Mhm.
suddenly, boom, interest rates go to 7-8%. Guess what happens? Everybody's out of work. And then
Yeah.
guess what's going to happen over the next 5 years? It's going to cycle back. So to lower that jarring effect of these cycle patterns that every employer and every employee has to go through,
Yeah.
it's really about reimagining how the workforce looks. And AI is like the first time that I've seen a technology get anywhere close to what we're talking about, which is kind of this being that best employee for that role
Yeah.
that can really bring in a lot of value.
Yeah, it's about decreasing the valleys, right? Knowing that, okay, well, we understand the markets are cyclical, and when things happen, It's about just trying to stop the bleed before it becomes a heavy downward hill. So if you are able to have ways to bounce back or create a buffer between that disassociation, I think that's extremely important. One thing I want to do, kind of going on some of this and talking about adopting consumers and getting people more comfortable with this, working title, yeah, guys, game time. I don't really like it, but that's what we're gonna do. I wanna I wanna jump in here, and we've kind of done this as a brainstorm internally with a few different customers and like products that they've gone through. But let's just take, for example, and try to like visualize a brand gradually introducing AI into its product design process. Whether that's something that, hey, consumer post purchase, here are some things that AI is going to assist you with now that this product is in your home or you're engaging with this product. I think it's a really interesting case as we're now looking at a roadmap of where AI might go with product and consumer experiences, maybe sooner rather than later, just because, as most big brands are probably looking at it, is like, how do I now have a Samsung fridge and how do I get AI involved in this somehow? I went over to a friend's birthday party for their kid a couple weeks ago, and they have one of the fridges that essentially has an iPad right built in that's like showing them the weather and like giving them sports news. I'm like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, but at the same time, he's just like, oh, when you're staying here, like it'll give you my grocery order and all this stuff. I'm like, yeah, but it also lets you scroll the internet and how many times you're going to Best Buy standing in front of your phone to buy an iPad. But like, that's something that pops up. So it's creating this like engaged consumer experience that I think some brands might miss on, but if they're listening to this podcast, why don't we give them a handful of things to think about?
Yeah, I think there's obviously, we could sit here and talk about millions of different potential outcomes on how AI is going to integrate into our day-to-day lives. But let's just take, just on the top of our head, I think one major trend that's going to happen almost definitely, because it kind of parallels kind of the examples you've talked about. I think a lot of these products that have integrated technology, like the fridge with the internet or even Alexa for that matter, kind of went halfway, but they didn't have the tech, they didn't have the AI to really take it all the way through, right? They just ended up falling short of what the
gimmick,
promise.
But the vision was there.
So like one thing I for sure see happening is, and you can kind of extrapolate this as far as you want, but every product that we purchase will probably have in some form or fashion an AI persona. And so what do I mean by that? So, we'll take one example is, let's say I buy my niece a teddy bear, right? And so, go back 30, 40 years where you could pull a string and it would talk to you, but it would only say 3 or 4 things, right? And then maybe we got a little fancier in the late 90s where we could record our voice, which was a little spooky, but, still more customized, right? So we could include the name of the kid or whatever. I'm sure it already exists, but I don't doubt that it won't exist very quickly, where toys will start having, could have a QR code on it. It could have within it, kind of through USB or Bluetooth or whatever, ability to, an app obviously on your phone, and then your AI persona that you create as a parent. You could say your name is this, you love sports, you love, you're telling the teddy bear this obviously, but all the things that all the things that my niece loves. And then I would say like, and, you love swimming and this, and your best friend is my niece, blah, blah, blah. So, and
all
then now
privatized in its own vector store.
But what's great about it is
exactly
what's great about it is the niece can ask questions and it's going to be different. It's actually like having a friend, right? I joke about this, but I always say to my son, there's a probably good chance that your kids, which will probably happen in the next 8 to 10 years, there's a non-zero chance, it may not be high, but it's going to be non-zero, that their first girlfriend or boyfriend experience, whether they know it or not, might be an AI agent. It's kind of weird to think that. It's kind of like how we thought of online dating in '94. Everybody cringed. Like, you guys met on
catfish in the AOL chat room.
You guys met online and Match.com. Oh, that's gross. Why didn't you meet in a bar like normal people, right? So let's take that to another step. All the way to the other extreme of the spectrum, which is actually, a project that I would love to see happen because, obviously you and I have experience in the real estate sector for the last few years, is I think that every time you buy a home, it should come with, especially new homes, it should come with a AI agent that is fully trained on all the things that your home needs to know, right? All the things that we need, not once or twice a day, but once or twice a year. But we're like scrambling through our junk drawer, tearing through all the documents that we got at the closing to try to find this one piece of information that actually at that point in time is super critical. Like,
Yeah.
for example, the color that they painted my kitchen, because I have to go buy paint, or I have to look up if the HOA docs allow me to build up a fence higher than 4 feet. Or maybe I need to get the serial number off my air conditioning unit and see if it's still under warranty. Or maybe the warranty is already in my AI agent. I just say, hey, is my AC unit under warranty? Oh, yeah, it is. And then maybe I ask that AI agent who serviced it last or who installed it, so I could just go to them.
Yeah. Are there any preferred vendors that we get
Exactly.
discounts through, whatever the case may be?
You can kind of extrapolate those two scenarios and see kind of all the possibilities of what an AI agent that is trained on a product can offer you, even if it's a support thing. You kind of mentioned a little bit about refrigerators, but it could also be a QR code that you scan on a refrigerator and it says, hey, nice to meet you. My name is Fridge. What can I help you with? And you're like, hey man, the water's tasting weird, or for whatever reason, I can't get the freezer to go below 4 degrees. What's going on? And it can help you troubleshoot. It might even ask you to pull out your camera and show him the refrigerator, and it'll use AI to decipher what's going on, right? Yeah. Or it might even be smart enough to connect to your fridge and read some sort of information from the computer within. So I think AI is going to slowly permeate into everything. And I don't think it's going to be like the first phase of this gimmicky Alexa or even Siri. It's not going to be limited like that, because instead of it being kind of this thin layer that the phone manufacturers or like the Apples and the Amazons threw at us with this, like, hey, this is some voice activated cool stuff, but it really never permeated beyond that. It's going to be much more integrated. Whereas I could imagine actual products fully integrating into and assuming and consumers assuming that when they buy a product, and they'll probably prefer to buy a product that becomes AI enabled. And I think that'll be just as powerful as saying it's organic or American made, because I think people are going to love the idea that this product, if I have a problem with it, if I need to return it, if I have a question, I don't have to call customer support. The product will answer the questions I have.
Yeah. I think having the visual aspect would be kind of cool. Like, you get a washer and a dryer, and there was a commercial a handful of years ago where it was for a mechanic service. I can't remember exactly which one, but I remember like all of the people that are coming in are like, my car is making this chugga 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 sound. Exactly. And the guy's like, oh yeah, you need this. And that could be very
100%.
Very well where we see AI start to take audio and visual cues. And
100%.
You say, hey, every time my ice maker kicks on, it's making this sound. Or I'm noticing that this area of my fridge is building up with water. And that's somewhere in a manual somewhere.
Well, here's
like,
the beautiful thing.
Exists.
But here's the beautiful thing about it. It only takes one user to have that experience. Just like it only takes one user to post something on Reddit that says, hey, I have this issue. Did anybody solve it? The minute the solution is posted and that AI learns it, it can now share it with all the users.
Yeah.
So imagine the power of that. Whereas you're inversing the fact that like the support person may not be aware of that issue. They may have never heard of it. They don't know how to help you. But you're now deploying it from a distributed perspective. Like, some other user had the same issue. They figured out it was the water filter needed to be changed out.
Yep.
But the AI learned from that. So I don't have to go hunt Reddit forums. I don't have to go and find some YouTube video. The AI is learning all this. And this is why training is like, we talk about how important training is. But when you deploy AI, whether it be as a co-pilot or a sidekick to a product like what we're talking about, or in a business, even as a service provider, like an air conditioning, repairman, or a plumber, or a teacher, or, a stylist, all of these things can be deployed in the same way, right? You can actually deploy an AI agent for a specific customer. Like, say it's a hairstylist, right? And a woman gets her hair done. She has certain color combinations, right? Certain, what she did in the past, what haircut she liked, what she didn't like. And so all these things can be incorporated into your experience so that you can recall back in the day, like, oh, what did I get? What was that combination of color that I used? Or a plumber could say, hey, I was here before. What did I put in? What kind of piping did I put in here, a year ago? And even if it was a different plumber, it could all be beneficiary. So I think when people think about AI today, they think of it as this, like, all-knowing being that sits on top of the mountain, and ChatGPT is kind of the mouthpiece. They're shouting to it and getting answers back. But what I think is going to ultimately end up being the best example of how AI is going to change the world is in these micro agents that are going to be deployed, not in the thousands, but in the billions, that are going to permeate through all of these things, almost become invisible. And it will become second nature to talk to a product, as weird as that sounds, and get answers back. Now, talking could be chatting, could be through an app, or it could be voice, but literally expect a product to be able to answer the issue that you have.
Yeah.
And it be the guide on how to best use that product, whether it be fixing a printer or whether it be, fixing your air conditioning in your house, or, figuring out how to use a new computer or a keyboard, whatever it might be. I think this is, the expectation that we have. And so working toward that, just like how everything has become web enabled, we went from a small website all the way to kind of
it'll be AI enabled now.
It'll be AI enabled, and AI is no different than, we went from web page to website, to app, right? And now we're going to agent, and it's a natural evolution, right? If you think about, if you think about a website, it was very thin, didn't do a lot, and then we moved into a web application like an e-commerce site. Now it had some functionality, and then we said, this is great, but I want to be able to do it when I'm on the road, or I'm in my car, or I'm waiting for my kid at school in the line. So now it went to the mobile phone as an app, and so now we're saying, great, we have an app, but I'm kind of sick of apps. I don't want to log into another app. I want I want it to do things more efficient, and I want things to be done for me. And so we're in the evolution of app to agent. And so that's an exciting time to see. So I think when people are fearful of what's next or how to approach it, I always tell them, correlate back to your experience moving through that technology evolution, and it's not going to be any different here.
Yeah, I want to make sure in the Substack for this episode, I know you haven't seen the movie because I'm like 20 years younger than you, but the movie back in the late 90s, early 2000s called Smart House that the Disney Channel made, and like it was so cheesy and such a great like throwback, but this is exactly where we see, having a house be built with an AI built in. And of course it goes Disney-fied and the house goes crazy and tries to, I guess, kill the family. But it was a good movie back then when you're in your, early teens being like, wow, what a cool house. So I do think there's going to be, I think we should write an article up about Smart House then and now and do some extrapolation. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And I think we have a couple blogs that talk about, kind of that aspect of how to do it. And if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a business owner, or you work for a company or looking for something to do, think this is like going to be the next big evolution, right? Like this is going to be where a lot of money is going to be made, and the big guys are not going to necessarily attack it quite aggressively. They're going to be focused on building out the platforms to drive this. So like if you have any inclination to do something cool, obviously we have a platform that can help you accelerate it. But even without us, think about products around you that you have an expertise in or you have a passion for, and think about how you could create an AI agent that might be useful for all the people that own that same product. Right? It could be anything, honestly. It could. I mean, I've talked to my son who plays Dungeons and Dragons, and we're building out AI agents that are dungeon masters that can
virtual DMs.
I mean, it's literally everywhere that you go. You go, oh, you could create an AI agent that actually can help that experience get better. Or so, like that's where I think the next wave of entrepreneurs, the next wave of millionaires and billionaires is going to come from, is taking kind of this world that we live in that is kind of inanimate, for lack of a better word, with of things around us, and almost like this process of humanization, right, where everything starts to have a personality, or at least has some communication, a human user interface that people can tap into. And I'm not saying that I'm going to sit here and talk to my thermos for 5 hours straight, but But I think so. I mean, there are some exceptions to the rule on making sane decisions. But I do think that it's going to be a new user behavior that's going to come in fast and furious, and so anybody ahead of the game is going to benefit from it.
Products with personas, I think, is definitely going to be something that everyone should be on the lookout for in the near future. But also for anyone in product development, start looking at ways right now that you can start creating a roadmap for that, and how AI will implement. I think that's going to be huge. Yeah. But I think we covered a ton on this episode, and want to thank everyone again for joining us today on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue the discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
See you, buddy.
Takes the flow, Leah Rich on the mic, ready to explore.